Have you ever struggled with some really annoying pests in your garden?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It can be so frustrating, right?
Absolutely.
Well, today we're going to be diving into this fictional conversation between these two young entrepreneurs,
Yeah, okay.
Kesser and Steen, from this story called MoreOns.
Yeah.
They've got this pretty tricky situation with a Sticklesbear bloodvips.
Sticklesbear, what?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, right?
Yeah.
It's actually a gooseberry sawfly.
Oh, okay, I've heard of those.
Yeah. And their approach to dealing with it is really interesting. They're all about combining making a profit with protecting biodiversity.
That's cool. It's like they're finding a way to make sustainability work for them, too.
Exactly. And their story starts in a pretty familiar setting, a garden center.
Oh, I can picture it now. Rows and rows of plants.
Yeah, and they're observing these adults having a conversation about, all those big environmental issues.
Climate change and pollution and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All that stuff that can make you feel kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah, totally.
But Kesser and Steen, they quickly shift their focus to something a bit more immediate. This gooseberry sawfly infestation that's threatening this local gardener's harvest.
So what's so special about gooseberries?
Well, apparently they're pretty important to this gardener. Her name is Tante Grun, and the story says her whole life might come to a standstill without those berries.
Wow, that must be pretty special.
Yeah, and I mean, gooseberries have a really interesting history, too. They were used for all sorts of things back in the day, medicinal purposes, jams, pies.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah. So facing this potential berry crisis, we see the typical response to pest problems pop up. Chemical pesticides.
Ah, the go-to solution for so many.
Right. But Kesser seems kind of hesitant about using them, especially after reading the warning label on those pesticide bottles.
Oh, yeah, those labels can be scary. All those warnings and complicated
I
instruction.
know, right? Makes you wonder what those chemicals are doing to the rest of the garden, too. Not just the pests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chemical pesticides, they can harm beneficial insects, disrupt the soil, even pose risks to human health.
Yeah, it's definitely not the most sustainable approach.
Not at all.
So Kesser starts looking for a more natural solution.
Good for him.
Yeah, he dives into all these online resources trying to understand, the life cycle of this gooseberry sawfly.
I can just picture him hunched over his computer, just absorbing all this information.
I know, right?
And he's looking for ways to combat the infestation without resorting to those harsh chemicals.
So he's taking a more holistic approach, considering the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And that's where Steen's entrepreneurial spirit comes in. He sees an opportunity not just to help Tante Grun, but to maybe make a little money in the process.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right? He's got this built-in business sense.
Yeah, he's thinking outside the box.
And you won't believe his big idea. Birdhouses.
Birdhouses.
Yeah, birdhouses. He remembers that they're good at building them, and he realizes they could attract birds to the garden.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here.
Right. The birds would then feast on those pesky sawfly larvae. It's like they're recruiting nature's own pest control team. That's brilliant. Using nature to solve a problem.
Exactly. And not only does it help Tante Grain, it promotes biodiversity in the garden.
Now, you've mentioned biodiversity a few times.
Yeah.
What's so important about that in this context?
Well, think of it like this. A biodiverse garden is a strong garden.
Okay.
Having lots of different plants and animals creates a natural balance.
I see.
So when one species has a population boom, like those pesky sawflies, there are other species there to help control them.
Oh, so it's like a natural system of checks and balances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The birds keep the sawflies under control so they don't wipe out Tante Crone's precious gooseberries.
Wow. So Kesser and Steen's plan, it's not just about getting rid of pests, it's about creating a healthy and balanced ecosystem.
Right, it's a much more holistic approach than just grabbing a bottle of pesticide.
Hey, Esri, this is fascinating. But I'm curious, is building birdhouses really enough to solve the whole problem?
That's a great question. And it's one we'll explore further as we dig deeper into Kesser and Steen's plan. They actually consider a bunch of different natural pest control methods.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, they talk about some more practical ideas. And of course, Steen never loses sight of their goal, making a profit from their eco-friendly efforts.
So they're finding creative ways to make sustainability profitable.
Exactly. It's pretty impressive.
It is. I can't wait to hear more about their plan.
Me too. We'll delve into all the juicy details in our next deep dive. So stay tuned. So we left off with Kesser and Steen brainstorming all these natural pest control ideas.
Right, and Steen's all about turning it into a business.
It's cool to see them thinking about the environment and how to make some money at the same time.
Definitely.
What were some of those other methods they were talking about?
Well, one idea they discussed was using a rake under the gooseberry bushes.
A rake?
Yeah, that sounds pretty simple, right?
Yeah, I'm picturing them just like raking leaves under the bushes.
Well, it's not really about the leaves. It's more about, like, knocking those sawfly larvae off the branches.
Oh?
Remember, those larvae spend a lot of their time munching on the underside of the leaves?
Yeah.
So giving those bushes a good shake with a rake can send those larvae tumbling to the ground.
And then what?
Well, once they're on the ground, they're way more vulnerable. Predators can easily snatch them up, or they might not be able to climb back up to the leaves.
Ah, so it's all about disrupting their feeding frenzy.
Exactly. It's a pretty low-tech solution, but it can be surprisingly effective.
But it sounds like a lot of work, especially if you have a ton of gooseberry bushes.
You're not wrong. And I think that's why Steen's more drawn to the birdhouse idea. It's a lot less labor-intensive.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mm.
And remember, Steen's always thinking about the big picture. He wants to create a business that's sustainable in the long run.
Right. Building birdhouses is a much more scalable solution.
Build them once, put them up, and then let nature take care of the rest.
Exactly. And they could even sell those birdhouses to other gardeners in the area who are struggling with pests.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Plus, birdhouses just look nice in garden, don't they?
Totally. They add to that whole biodiversity thing we were talking about.
And I bet Steen would be really good at marketing them too.
Oh, absolutely. He'd be all about highlighting the benefits, not just for the garden, but for the environment as a whole.
Yeah, he'd be like, support local birds, buy a birdhouse.
Exactly. He'd be tapping into that whole eco-conscious consumer trend.
He's a smart cookie, that Steen.
He is. But it's not all about the business side of things. Remember, Kesser's really concerned about finding solutions that work with nature.
Right, he's done all that research on the harmful effects of chemical pesticides.
So they make a good team, Steen with the business savvy and Kesser with the environmental awareness.
I wonder if they've considered other natural pest control options, though.
Like what?
I've heard of insecticidal soap. Have you ever used that?
Oh yeah, insecticidal soap's a good one. It's
Yeah.
pretty effective, and it's way more eco-friendly than those harsh chemical sprays.
How does it work?
Well, basically, it disrupts the insect's outer coating. It kind of like dehydrates them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's much more targeted than those broad-spectrum pesticides, so it doesn't harm as many beneficial insects.
That's good. So this sounds like they have a few different options to choose from.
They do. But even if they decide on the best approach, there's still the challenge of convincing Tante Grun.
All right. She might not be so keen on ditching those chemical sprays.
Exactly. A lot of people are used to those quick-fix solutions.
So how do they convince her that these natural methods are just as effective?
Well, Steen's already thinking about that. He knows they need to highlight the benefits, especially the tangible ones.
Like more gooseberries for her jams and pies.
Exactly. And maybe some scones for him and Kesser.
A little something for everyone.
Right. But they need to emphasize the long-term benefits, too. Well, they need to explain how attracting birds and creating a balanced ecosystem will not only get rid of the sawflies, but also prevent future pest outbreaks.
So it's about making her garden more resilient in the long run.
Exactly. It's a win-win for everyone. Tante Grun, the environment, and even Kesser and Steen's business venture.
It's a cool story, but even if they manage to convince Tante Grun, what about the practical side of things?
What do you mean?
Well, building birdhouses and raking under bushes takes time and effort. It's not exactly a walk in the park.
That's true. And that's a challenge a lot of entrepreneurs face, actually putting their plans into action.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a great idea, but actually executing it is a whole other story.
You got it. And that's what makes Kesser and Steen's journey so interesting. We've seen them brainstorm research, get excited about eco-friendly solutions, but now comes the hard part. Making it all happen.
Okay, so Kesser and Steen have all these great ideas for helping Tante Grun and like protecting the environment.
Right, birdhouses raking insecticidal soap.
But they need to actually like put those plans into action. Where do they even start?
Well, the first step is pretty simple, really. They need to build those birdhouses.
Yeah, but it's not just like hammering some wood together, right?
No, definitely not. They need to do some research and make sure those birdhouses are going to attract the right kind of birds.
The birds that will actually eat the sawfly larvae.
Exactly. They need to figure out what kind of birds live in Tante Grun's area and what kind of nesting boxes those birds prefer.
Oh, so they need to know about the size of the entrance hole, the types of materials they use.
Yeah, even where they put the birdhouse in the garden matters.
It's like they're creating a marketing campaign, but for birds.
I like that analogy.
So once they've built these perfect birdhouses, How do they convince Tante to actually buy them?
That's where Steen's, sales skills come in.
Yeah,
He needs to highlight the benefits, both the immediate ones and the long-term ones.
like more gooseberries and fewer pests.
Exactly. He can tempt her with the promise of more berries for her jams and pies, and maybe even some scones for himself and Kesser.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
But they need to go beyond just the immediate rewards.
What do you mean?
Well, they need to show her the bigger picture. Explain how attracting birds creates a natural balance in the garden. How it will make her garden healthier and more resistant to future pest problems.
So it's not just a quick fix, it's a long-term solution.
Right. And hopefully Tante Grün is open to those ideas.
But even with the best intentions, things don't always go according to plan, do they?
That's true, especially when you're dealing with nature.
Yeah, what if the birds decide they'd rather eat something else besides sawfly larvae?
That's a possibility. There are no guarantees when it comes to nature.
So Kesser and Steen need to be prepared to adapt to their strategy.
Definitely. They need to watch what's happening in the garden, track the bird activity, and maybe even try out different types of birdhouses or different locations for the birdhouses.
It's all about learning and adjusting as they go.
That's a good lesson for any entrepreneur. Things rarely go exactly as planned.
I think what I admire most about Kesser and Steen is that they're not just thinking about profits.
Yeah, they're thinking about the environment and the community.
They want to find solutions that benefit everyone. It's a really inspiring story.
I agree. It shows how entrepreneurial thinking and a passion for nature can create real change.
So the takeaway for our listeners today is to think about the problems in your own life.
Yeah.
What challenges could you tackle with this same combination of creativity and environmental awareness?
What small steps can we all take to build a healthier and more sustainable future for ourselves and for the planet?
It's something to think about.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of natural pest control entrepreneurship and the power of thinking outside the box.
We hope you've been inspired to look at the challenges in your life with a fresh perspective and to explore the amazing possibilities of working with nature.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those entrepreneurial spirits burning bright.
Have you ever, struggled with some really annoying pests in your garden?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It can be so frustrating, right?
Absolutely.